Something, not a sound, really, but a feeling. You ever get that? Like the air shifts. Like something's different behind the door, even if the world outside stays the same. And before I even realized it, my hand was on the doorknob. That's the part one keep replaying. The moment before. The second where I could have walked away, and none of this would have ever happened. But I didn't. I turned the knob. I pushed the door open. And what I saw. It wasn't wrong. Not exactly. But it wasn't right either. It was him. Alone. Doing something I still don't know how to explain. It wasn't what you think. It wasn't even about that. It was the way he looked at me. Like I'd caught him doing something sacred. Something that wasn't meant for anyone else to witness. And I didn't say anything. I didn't gasp. I didn't close the door. I just froze. There are some silences that speak louder than screaming. That moment, we didn't speak. But something passed between us. And I've been carrying it ever since. I don't even know how long I stood there. 10 seconds? A minute? A lifetime? When I finally turned away, I felt like I'd left a part of myself in that room. Something I couldn't get back. And maybe I didn't want it back. I know how it sounds. Trust me, I've judged myself in every way you probably already have. But this story isn't about crossing lines, not in the way people expect. It's about what happens when the lines move. When connection shows up in the most unexpected places, and you don't know whether to run from it or hold on. I wish I could say this story gets easier. That it finds some neat little ending tied in a bow. But it doesn't. It only gets messier. Because after that night, nothing was the same between us. Not the air. Not the glances. Not the things we didn't say. And the truth is, I still don't know if I should have walked away, or if I should have done what I did. You might think you know where the story is going. But trust me, you don't. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the hidden corners of the heart. He never really talked to me. Not until that night. And even then, he didn't say a word. It was what I saw that said everything. But maybe I should go back before the silence took over everything. I'm in my mid-30s. Married, yes, but most days, it feels more like a contract than a connection. My husband is always busy. Business trips, meetings, late-night calls that bleed into early mornings. He says he's doing it for us, for our future. But I don't remember the last time us meant anything more than shared bills and shared silence. We live in a nice house. Brick on the outside, soft light inside, always smells faintly of lavender and furniture polish. It looks warm, but the warmth doesn't reach the corners. You know what I mean? A house that feels like it's trying too hard to be a home. Dinner is always quiet. I cook. I plate everything neatly. My husband eats with one hand on his phone. We ask the usual questions. How was your day? Need anything from the store? But it's all noise. Filler. Like reading from a script we stopped believing in years ago. And then, there's my stepson. 17. Quiet. Withdrawn. Artistic in a way that makes you pause, not just talented, but sensitive. He sketches things no one else notices. Shadows. Glances. The curve of light falling through a curtain. He spends most of his time in his room, door closed, headphones in. Around his father, he barely speaks. They don't fight. They don't connect. It's like they're on two different frequencies, passing each other in the same space without ever really touching. But around me, he was different. Not talkative, no, but softer. He'd linger in the kitchen a little longer when I was washing dishes. Sometimes he'd ask what I was listening to or comment on a book I left on the counter. Nothing big. Just little moments. Quiet ones. But I felt them. Maybe that's what scared me later. How seen I'd started to feel. I hadn't felt seen in a long time. Not by my husband. Not by anyone, really. Most days, I felt like wallpaper. There, but unnoticed. Familiar, but invisible. There was a kind of loneliness that settled in my chest like dust. You don't notice it at first. You just start breathing a little shallower, moving a little slower, smiling because it's easier than explaining why you don't feel like smiling anymore. And in that silence, he appeared, not as something forbidden, not as temptation, but as recognition. Like someone else in the house had noticed the quiet too and was trying to survive it the same way I was. He never crossed a line. Not then. But he didn't need to. His presence, his eyes, they spoke more than words ever could. And that terrified me. Because the more I felt understood, the more I realized how empty I'd been feeling. Sometimes, I'd hear him laughing softly in his room while watching something on his laptop. And I'd pause outside his door, just listening. Not out of nosiness. Out of longing. Just to feel connected to someone in this house. We were all living under the same roof. But we were all strangers in our own ways. I used to think I was just waiting for my husband to come home, for love to return, for something to feel real again. But that night, standing at his door, everything shifted. And the part that haunts me most is that I didn't feel afraid. I felt awake. It was raining that night. Heavy. The kind of rain that makes the whole world feel quieter, like everything's being hushed. The house was darker than usual. A storm had knocked out the power around 8. My husband was out of town again, some emergency flight to Atlanta. I didn't ask for details. I'd stopped asking months ago. I lit a few candles, made some tea, tried to pretend the quiet didn't bother me. But the silence, it wasn't peaceful. It pressed in. Tight. Almost suffocating. Every creak in the walls, every gust of wind outside, it all felt louder in that emptiness. I checked the locks, walked the hallway just to hear my own footsteps. That's when I saw it, a soft flicker under his door. My stepson's. A flicker that didn't belong to candlelight. Pale, cold, like the glow of a screen. I paused. The hallway felt longer than usual. My skin prickled. I wasn't scared. I was pulled, like something was waiting. I knocked softly. Just once. No answer. I waited. Still nothing. Just the low hum of something playing behind the door. A muffled rhythm. A whisper. I should have walked away. That's what I keep telling myself. That's the line I draw over and over. I should have walked away. But my hand was already on the knob, and the door creaked open, slow, soft, and I stepped inside. He didn't hear me at first. He had headphones in, curled up on the floor, back against his bed. The screen of his tablet lit up his face in that eerie kind of way, like he was caught between two worlds, one real, one imagined. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Not really. But there was something so exposed about the way he sat there. Something raw. His knees were drawn up, one hand resting near his chest, the other loosely holding the tablet. His eyes were wet. His lips parted like he'd just stopped whispering something he couldn't say out loud. And I froze. It wasn't the content on the screen that caught me, it was the look in his eyes. Like he wasn't watching something, he was feeling something. Deep. Private. Something that had nothing to do with the video, and everything to do with whatever he was carrying. Then he looked up. He saw me. And everything stopped. He didn't flinch. He didn't cover up. He didn't rush to pause what was playing or hide himself. He just looked at me. Straight into me. And in that look, something passed between us. Not desire. Not shame. Just recognition. Like two people caught in a moment neither of them planned, but both of them understood. I should have backed out. Closed the door. Pretended I hadn't seen anything. But I didn't. I stood there. Long enough for the silence to feel like it was speaking. And he didn't move. And I didn't breathe. It felt like a conversation happened in that silence. One I didn't start. One I didn't know how to end. And the strangest thing is, I didn't feel like I was invading. I felt like I had been invited. Not with words. Not with gestures. But with the stillness. With the trust. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe seconds. Maybe minutes. But I left changed, Not because of what I saw, but because of what I felt. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the rain tapping against the window like it had something to say. I kept replaying that moment over and over again. The way he looked at me, the stillness in the room, the way my hand stayed frozen on the doorframe, like my body didn't trust me to move. Was it an accident? A mistake? Or was there something else under the surface, something I didn't want to admit? I whispered excuses to myself in the dark. I didn't touch him. I didn't say anything. I just stood there. But the more I said it, the less it felt like the truth. Because maybe doing nothing was something. And that's where the guilt began to sink in. Not from what happened, but from what didn't. From the fact that I could have closed the door the second I saw him. I could have backed away, let the silence protect us both. But I didn't. I lingered. Why? I've asked myself that question 100 different ways. Why didn't I walk away sooner? Why did I stay long enough to memorize the light in the room, the way his eyes didn't look surprised to see me, the way mine didn't look away? And the only answer I can come up with, the one that keeps me up at night, is that something in me wanted to be seen. Not touched. Not taken. Just seen. It wasn't about lust. Not then. It was about recognition. Two people in the same house, finally seeing each other for the first time. Because truthfully, I hadn't felt seen in years. I'd become background noise in my own life. The woman who cooked, cleaned, smiled when she didn't feel like it. The one who listened but wasn't heard. And then, there he was, this boy who barely spoke, looking at me like I wasn't invisible. Like I wasn't just his father's wife, or someone in the way. He looked at me like I was real. I know how that sounds. I know how it looks from the outside. But from the inside, it didn't feel wrong. It felt tragic. Like two people drifting alone through the same house, finding each other in a moment neither one of us asked for. I tried to go about my routine the next day. Tried to pretend it hadn't happened. Made coffee. Folded towels. But everything felt off, like the floor under my feet had tilted just slightly. And every time I passed his room, my heart raced, not from fear, but from the ache of something unfinished. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. Because something changed that night. In him. In me. In the space between us. And once something shifts like that, it's almost impossible to pretend it hasn't. It started small. Little moments, barely noticeable if you weren't already looking. He'd stay in the room just a second longer after everyone else left. When I was in the kitchen, he'd pass behind me too close, maybe, but not close enough to be sure. Sometimes our hands would brush when we both reached for something. Just barely. Just enough to make me catch my breath. Enough to make me wonder, was that on purpose? And maybe more dangerous than that, did I want it to be? He didn't speak much, but I could feel him watching me. Not in a bold, obvious way. In a quiet, observing way. Like he was memorizing things I didn't even know I was showing. I'd catch him leaning in the doorway while I did dishes, pretending to scroll his phone. Not saying a word. Just there. Close enough for me to feel it. I didn't stop him. And I didn't move away. One afternoon, I was tidying up the living room. I found his sketch pad left open on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't touch his things. But something about the way it was left there, just left, like it was waiting to be found. I picked it up. And there I was. Drawn in pencil, in his delicate, careful strokes. Not glamorous, not posed, just me. Sitting at the kitchen table, head tilted, eyes somewhere far away. But it wasn't the drawing that stopped me cold. It was the expression on my face. I was smiling. Not a forced smile. Not the polite smile I wore like armor around my husband. It was soft. Real. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked like that. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough for the guilt to settle in my stomach like something spoiled. I told myself, it's just a drawing. He's just a boy. That's what I kept saying. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a drawing. And I didn't feel like just anything. The worst part is, I didn't feel disturbed. I felt seen. I closed the sketchbook and put it right back where I found it. I didn't say anything, not to him, not to myself. But that night, I dreamt of the version of me in that drawing. The woman who looked like she still had a light inside her. The one who didn't flinch when someone really looked at her. After that, it got harder to pretend. The space between us felt charged, like something invisible was hanging in the air, waiting to be touched. He'd walk into a room, and I'd feel it before I saw him. Like my body noticed before my mind could catch up. Like I'd been tuned to his presence. I wanted to confront him, to ask what that drawing meant. Why he looked at me the way he did. Why he lingered in the same space I was in and didn't say a word. But part of me didn't. Because I was afraid he'd stop. My husband had flown out that morning. Last-minute meeting in Chicago. He kissed me goodbye, barely looked me in the eye, and promised he'd call. He didn't. The house felt heavier without him, but not emptier. Just heavier. Like all the unspoken things between us had decided to take up more space now that he was gone. It was late, past midnight. The rain had stopped, but the air outside still felt wet, sticky. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't even tried. I walked the hallway slowly, barefoot, pretending I was just checking windows, but really, I was just listening. That's when I heard it. Low music. Faint. Coming from his room. His door was cracked open. Just barely. Enough to see a sliver of light against the carpet. I should have walked past. I knew that. But then I heard it my name. Soft. Like it had been caught in his throat before it ever reached the air. I froze. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped closer. I pushed the door open, just a little more. He was sitting at the edge of his bed, shirt off, headphones hanging around his neck. His eyes found mine before I even fully stepped in. There was something in the air. Not tension like anger. Tension like gravity. Like we were both holding our breath without realizing it. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. I stood there, the hallway light behind me casting a faint glow across the room. His face was lit only by the bluish light of his laptop, and still, he didn't look away. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. Full of things we hadn't said. Moments we hadn't dared name. The weight of glances that had lingered too long. The memory of that sketch. The memory of the rain. The memory of that night. I walked in. Slowly, without thinking. I stood in the middle of his room, unsure why I hadn't turned around yet. He shifted, like he might stand. Like he was waiting for a sign, something from me. And I gave it. Not a touch. Not a word. Just a look. One that said, "I'm here." He stood. Slowly. And for a second, we were inches apart. Close enough to feel the warmth of the other. Close enough to hear each other breathe. But we didn't move. We didn't cross anything physical. But emotionally, we crossed something. I felt it in my chest. In my stomach. In the way my hands trembled at my sides. He didn't touch me. I didn't touch him. But we crossed something. I just don't know what to call it. When I finally left his room, the silence in the hallway screamed louder than any argument I'd ever had. I lay in bed that night, eyes wide open. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I didn't even blink for what felt like hours. Because I knew that whatever line we'd tiptoed around before was gone now. We were somewhere else entirely. And there was no going back. You won't believe what came next. Subscribe now to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. You'll want to see this through. The morning after was quiet. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just hollow. Like the house had swallowed its own voice. I got up before anyone else. I don't know why. Maybe to pretend I still had control over something. I made coffee. Scrambled eggs. Burnt the toast. I moved like I had a script in my head. Step by step. Open drawer. Close fridge. Pour tea. But my hands were shaking. I couldn't stop them. Not even when I pressed my palms against the counter and tried to breathe. He didn't come into the kitchen that morning. Not like he usually did. No lingering near the doorway. No quiet presence behind me. No sketchbook forgotten on the couch. He stayed in his room. And the door stayed closed. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. When I passed him in the hallway later, he didn't look at me. Not even for a second. He kept his head down. Walked past like I wasn't there. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. I wanted to say something. Anything. Just to break the quiet. But I didn't. I was scared of what might come out of my mouth. Scared of what I might want to say. That afternoon, my husband came home. The sound of his suitcase hitting the floor felt deafening. His voice boomed louder than usual. His footsteps echoed more sharply. The house felt smaller with him in it, tighter, like the walls had shifted overnight. He kissed me on the cheek. Said something about delays and bad weather. I smiled. Or tried to. But it felt like dragging a rock across my face. He didn't notice. He never did. I made dinner. The three of us sat at the table like we always did. Plates clinking. Forks scraping. The only thing missing was conversation. My husband talked about a client. Something about numbers and projections. I nodded in the right places. My stepson didn't say a word. He barely touched his food. And me? I just stared at my plate. I couldn't taste anything. Every time I looked up, I caught myself searching for his eyes. Just to know if he still felt it. If he was trying to forget it, too. But he never looked at me. Not once. I thought maybe it would fade. That if we gave it time, it would dissolve into nothing. That it would blur like a dream, just one moment in a sea of quiet ones. But it didn't. The silence between us didn't fade. It thickened. Hardened. Like glass between two people who used to share the same air. I told myself I was doing the right thing by saying nothing. That silence was safer than truth. But the truth has a way of sitting heavy on your chest when no one's looking. I thought distance would dissolve it. But silence only makes some things louder. I haven't told anyone. Not a soul. Not because I'm trying to protect him, or myself. But because I don't even know how I'd begin. How do you confess something that never technically happened, but still changed everything? How do you explain a moment that didn't cross a line, but somehow erased one? Every night since, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was supposed to stop it sooner. Or if I was already too far gone by the time I even noticed what was happening. I question everything. Was I the adult in control? Or the one silently begging to be seen, to be saved? Some days, I think I was the responsible one. I didn't touch him. I didn't say anything inappropriate. I didn't act. But other days like today, I wonder if my silence was its own kind of betrayal. Not just to him, but to myself. Because the truth is, I miss it. Not the tension. Not the risk. The closeness. The way someone finally looked at me like I was there. Like I wasn't fading into the background. I miss being noticed. Not in the way that makes people talk. In the way that makes you feel like you're alive again. I hate myself for that. I hate how something so quiet, so subtle, still echoes inside me like a scream. I keep telling myself, he's just a boy. He's your stepson. And he is. But in that moment, when our eyes met, when the air between us shifted, he wasn't a child and I wasn't a mother. We were just two people, two souls, two silences reaching for something they didn't have a name for. And that's the part one can't forgive. Not because I crossed a line, but because I wanted to be that close to someone. Because I needed to feel chosen. Just once. Not as a wife. Not as a stepmother. Not as someone who was needed for what she could give. But as someone who mattered. I carry that shame with me. Quietly. Carefully. Some women carry regret like a stone. Others carry it like a flame. Me? I carry it like a mirror. Because every time I look at myself now, I see the woman he drew. The one who smiled without realizing it. And I wonder if I'll ever be her again. Have you ever let something happen? Not because you wanted it to, but because you didn't know how to say no to the silence inside you. That silence that builds when your life stops feeling like it belongs to you. When every word you don't say becomes louder than the ones you do. When your body is there, but your heart is somewhere else. Reaching. I didn't wake up wanting any of this. I didn't plan it. But I also didn't stop it. And maybe that's what scares me most. That part of me needed it. Not him, specifically, but what he represented. Presence. Attention. That quiet pull of being seen again. And now I sit with it all. The guilt. The confusion. The pieces of a story that never quite became a story, but still broke something inside me. So I'm asking you, was this betrayal? Or something more complicated? Something messier? Sadder? Something human? Tell me in the comments. Please. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Because silence. It can make you feel like you're the only one who's ever slipped. And if stories like this stir your soul, if they make you think, ache, remember, then like this video and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Desire doesn't knock on your door wearing warning signs. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears the face of someone needing you. And sometimes it lives in the silence between two people who never meant to meet like that. There are no villains in this story. No heroes either. Just people. Lonely ones. Drifting through a house full of unspoken things. This story doesn't have a clean ending. No neat conclusion. No redemption wrapped in a bow. Just echoes. And consequences.